All right, thank you guys. Ryan, you want to kick us off a little background and intro?
Yeah, of course. Is this thing on? Can you all hear me? Oh, good. I know how to use an on-off switch. Ryan McMorrow, I'm a Senior Vice President at Vista Equity Partners. For those of you that don't know who Vista is, we are the largest investment firm in the world that invests exclusively in B2B software. So I think I came to the right place. We've been around for 25 years. We've grown to be over 120 billion of assets under management across multiple private equity fund strategies. Many people associate Vista with kind of late stage private equity, large buyout, and we'll talk about what that is and the different types of funds. I actually sit in our growth fund at Vista. So we focus on partnering with smaller, faster growing software companies, usually anywhere between like 8 to 40 million of ARR. And we're kind of taking the greatest hits of Vista best practice, which many of you may have heard of, is kind of what we're known for in the market, of adding operational value through best practice to help our companies grow to 50 to 100 million of ARR and really kind of achieve that position of market leadership in their end market. So I've spent my entire investing career in B2B software and in growth. It's where I love to be. Spent a lot of time around vertical SaaS, a lot of time around supply chain, transportation, logistics, manufacturing, and I'm just so thrilled to be here. This is an awesome opportunity to get to know you all.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Masawi. My background is, I come from a different place than Ryan. I'm an operating advisor. So I actually was a co-founder of an integrated payment providing firm back in 2002. So sort of one of the very early embedded payment providers in the nonprofit and higher education space. That I'm going to just throw Josh under the bus because Joshua and me were like the dinosaurs of embedded payments. That's how young the kind of embedded financial services and payments is. And so I've been doing it for quite some time. Sold that business several years ago, and now I'm an operating advisor with a growth equity firm, JMI, growth equity software investor. Again, sort of going since the 1990s. Again, investing in B2B vertical SaaS and companies like Clio, Ignition, Jane, sort of some very, very successful growth software businesses, all with incredibly successful payment businesses. So I come to it from the operating side. My job as an operating advisor is to help companies that are software companies that are either thinking about deploying a payments or financial services product, or they have that business at scale and they're now kind of doing some strategic planning as to what that actually looks like. So that's my background. Just fun fact, just very, very quickly. When I had a business, I used to give these talks about how to use payments to actually grow your software business. With very little success, sometimes the audiences were never as sort of rich as this. I think I should have listened to my marketing team's advice and maybe called them, how to use payments to get money from private equity. And then I would have had packed rooms everywhere I went. So that was, unfortunately, I learned that a little too late. But anyway, thanks for being here, and I'm excited to have this talk.
Awesome, thanks guys. Well, to kind of kick things off, I think from at least my perspective, when we were starting the company, it wasn't clear to me the difference between venture, growth equity, private equity. I think we were discussing before, even growth equity in 2021 might be different than what growth equity is in 2025. Ryan, if you can kind of kick things off and at least help the audience understand, like, what is the difference and what are the different expectations? Just break down the kind of 3 core segments there.
Yeah, happy to do so. So I know this is called a private equity session, so maybe we'll just start there. Private equity. Traditionally, they invest in kind of later stage businesses, usually that have achieved market leadership, right? So, I mean, in the software markets, this is super squishy, but somewhere probably around 50 to 100 million of ARR, at least in the private markets, right? That's where usually the right type of investor at that stage, you own an appreciable percentage of the market, you're probably operating profitably or very profitably, you know who your customer base is. It's now about optimization. A private equity investor who takes a controlling stake in your business is probably the best suited investor for that type of outcome that provides liquidity to you, your founders, management team, your prior investors. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it's venture capital. Venture capital, if you were to kind of map out like 2 axes of how to compare these different types of investment firms, risk and return, like venture capital would be in the upper right-hand quarter. Like high risk, these are early stage companies, but high return, right? Typically they're investing behind big markets. maybe even like N of 1 products in their end market, and they can scale and grow rapidly, and they're seeking to produce a return for their investors that's in the 10x plus cash on cash category, whereas like late stage buyout, maybe like 2.5x, 3 times cash on cash. So that's venture, and I think in the middle you kind of have this squishy type of investor that we call growth equity, and I would actually put our fund probably more in that camp. So in the continuum in the life cycle of a business, what really dictates the transition from venture to growth to private equity is really product market fit, right? And do I have a core set of customers who have gone through a renewal cycle where I can look into the data and I can understand this is a business that's built a product that its end customers love, it knows who their ideal customer profile is, and now the name of the game is scaling the business and growing it relatively rapidly, but it's a lower risk profile than venture capital because, again, I know who that market is. I can see it in the data. And so these are investors that are not private equity related. They're not necessarily optimizing for cash flow and EBITDA during their hold period. They're growth oriented. They're usually valuing businesses off of ARR on the way in and ARR on the way out if you're a software business, and they're focused on growth. And there's many types of transactions that growth equity investors can optimize around. Usually it's a minority position where you're investing capital to go onto the balance sheet to fuel growth in the business going forward, but there's flexibility there. And like our fund, we can do primary capital to fuel growth or secondary capital to de-risk founders or provide liquidity to pre-existing investors.
I think that's something that I didn't fully appreciate, which was when we were raising venture, that growth equity was a little bit of a liquidity option, a little bit of an exit option, versus my mind was like grow. And I don't know if that was the 2015 mindset or that was just being in venture, but like the only outcome was grow very, very fast, and you're either going to get acquired for a ton of money or not. What opened my eyes and what I talk to a lot of founders about now is like, if you raise too much on the venture side, you almost can't get to growth equity because you've raised too much, your optionality is not there, and their multiples aren't as high as what you raised that on the venture side. But I think a lot of people forget that there's liquidity. There's not just an infusion on the balance sheet, there's liquidity for the founders, and that's a good option for the team. It's a half step. I'm curious, and Andrew, I'd love for you to comment this, being on the kind of operator seat. A lot of growth equity funds all talk about, and private equity funds all talk about their operating expertise and operating partners. I know you are one. I'll say from a founder's position, and I hope I don't get yelled at here on stage, it feels like the same product over and over that everyone talks about. Now I know there's different qualities of the product and it's all about the people, but you're on the kind of operating, but also on the investing side, trying to kind of help push that product forward. When you were an operator, how did you know which people to pick? And now that you're on the investing side, kind of offering that operating expertise, what do you recommend for founders who every fund says, hey, we've got an operating partner in payments, or we've got an operating partner here? Like, how should they evaluate that?
Oh, that is an incredibly big question. I think that it's about where you are in the stage, and I guess we're going to put the ring fence this around the payments and the financial services part of the business.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to sort of have a real hard look and assess where you are in that journey. Because I think a lot of people, when they're building a software business, and then payments becomes an opportunity, and it's like, yeah, we should do that. And is it a fully vested opportunity, or is it something that's just on the side of somebody's desk in a room that they have a day job? So I think sometimes when you're a founder and you're looking at whether or not it's the right time to go into payments or financial services, I think you have to answer the question as to whether or not you should. Because I think there's this great sort of temptation to just have it on a deck. So it's like AI and payments, and it's like you can have those two things on a deck, and it's like, okay, we've ticked those boxes. I think that's fundamentally different than actually saying that deploying a payment product is accretive to our business. And what I mean by that is it's accretive to us as a business, yes, but it's accretive to our customers. And so it helps our customers' workflow, whatever that looks like. It makes their solution more sticky, it makes it more rich, and it makes their customers' clients also have a better experience. And so you see these in the financials, you'll see these in the KPIs, in the payment KPIs. And so if you really believe in those things, then you've invested and you've launched it with varying success. And so therefore, you know what you need. And so out of those 3 investment, or 4 or 5, however many people you're talking to, you should be asking, so when you talk about having a payments or a financial services, first of all, do you have one? Where are they from? What is their experience? What are the other companies in your portfolio that is going through the same challenges that I am right now, whatever those challenges might be? You may be very early on, you may be at scale, who knows? And sort of hold them to account and say, right, exactly, explain to me with some case studies. How did it work? How did they create value? What did that even look like? I think those are the things that I think are a bit general an answer, but that's because there is no specific, there's no one playbook, as Becky said in her session. So I feel like it's about asking the right questions and making sure that for whether it's VC, private equity, growth equity, when they say they've checked the box of having a payments and financial services, make sure that they actually they have and it works and it's worked for others.
So when a team comes to you and we'll take our team, we wanted to launch payments, but we didn't have a payment person. So we were talking to a few different funds, we were talking to some different operating partners with kind of expertise in that. What do you see, if a company wants to work with you guys, what do they need on their side? Do they need a GM of payments to work directly with you? Do they need someone responsible? Or are they coming to get an investment from you and you're gonna help them, handhold them throughout the process? What are the most successful setups in your mind to launch payments?
So I think we all actually have different opinions on this. So I'll start with mine. I actually don't think that the be-all and end-all is to hire a VP of payments. Like, we want a payment business. First of all, it's like, who should we integrate with, and then who should we hire as a VP? Well, they're probably not the 2 right questions, because payments is incredibly complicated, which is why I love the complexity, is that it's not like a standalone business unit. VP of payments isn't going to come in and say, okay, fine, I'm going to build my empire, and I'm going to have my sales team and my services team, and I'm going to have my CX team, they don't do that. Like a really solid VP of payments, GM of payments, it's a cross-functional business. It's a team sport. So a lot of it is about how it's structured across the business. You can do that, and you can do that at scale without that person. I am actually involved, I'm on the board of a company that actually has got to a massive volume of payments without that lead. And so is it the right way? No, it's not always the right way. But I encourage everyone to think that it's not necessarily the easiest answer is to say we need to bring somebody in. Because if your organization isn't ready for it, if you don't have a mandate from the leadership to say, actually, as ServiceLine said this morning, you have to have that kind of rallying cry. If you don't have that top down, it's very, very difficult to build a priority in the payments product to actually make it successful, to get the adoption, to get the activation, to get all of those things. So my take is I don't think it's the first thing. I usually, to answer your question, I usually will do sort of just a temperature test to see, well, where is the organization now? Where is the challenge? Where are they? And what are the gaps that are actually stopping of getting them to the next gate, whatever that gate might be for them?
Ryan, I know you have a little bit.
Yeah, you alluded to maybe, I don't even think it's disagreement. I think actually I'll say something very similar to you. But in my experience, what I've seen is somebody who owns payments, who can think of it cross-functionally, generally has more organizational latitude to be able to build the product and to be able to take the product to market and leverage resources across the organization to iterate rapidly, right? Because you're building a new product and you're having to go to market not just in the customer base, but with new logos as well, provided the organization actually drives that from the top down. Like if you have a CEO who's skeptical that the payments product is gonna work and they're the product guy and they're the founder and they built the product, I don't care who that GM of payments is, they're never gonna be successful. And so in an organization like that, I think you've got to be a lot more flexible and maybe, okay, Mr. Opinions, like you want to build or you don't think a payments product's going to work, maybe you lead a Skunkworks team to trial it out to see it first, and then let's prove that it works and hire somebody. So you're right. We're not far apart on that. We're 100%. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I would say that some of the things that I've learned in my time in being an operating advisor versus an operator is sometimes I take that mantelpiece up. So I'll actually go in and I know the right questions to ask. So I'll say, look, okay, fine. What do the unit economics look like? What is our current flow of getting a customer from being a software customer to a software and payments customer? Are we proving that out? Then I'll say, okay, fine, let's do a little heat map. Let's actually have a look at customers, software customers that have signed up. And let's look at the early churn of those software churn of those customers. Now let's look at that same cohort of early churn customers when they have payment attached. Okay, a sort of surprise alert. It's usually lower. Almost always. I've never been in a company where if you embed payments, you don't see an improvement in your NRR, in your retention, a decrease in churn, especially early churn. So you kind of build that. My goal is to kind of build up this story and then say, okay, fine. There is the slide that you then show that sort of hypothetical CEO or whoever it is that isn't really bought in and say, so here's the thing. A software customer and a payments customer not only has a higher ARPA, it not only generates revenue, it is also stickier. It helps us with our early churn problem. Help me understand why we're not investing in this.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it literally is, there was a joke once about the definition of a consultant is anyone with a briefcase that comes from more than 50 miles away. Sometimes it's just somebody else coming in that knows the business and has gone through the business through diligence, through that the VCP, the value creation program, and then feeding the information back, clear as day, giving sometimes the same information that they had access to, and saying this is why it's important. That is an important function, I think, that can be played.
Yeah, as a founder, we looked at payments a little bit differently. I looked at payments as a negotiating tactic when we fundraised, and I think we talked a little bit about this, but we purposely didn't launch payments until we raised our growth equity round, because what I wanted was really smart people like this to look at the business, run a bunch of Excel models, and in their models say, hey, this is the synergy if this company did payments, here's what I can underwrite as the opportunity. So we decided as a business that we weren't going to launch payments until we raised our growth equity round. That way there was no, if we failed, there wasn't like, hey, this didn't work. I would rather just take the bet of they underwrote it, they're experts, they can help us get to it. Let's do nothing in payments, which allowed me to a little bit negotiate valuation more, because I was like, you guys know payments is a great opportunity, right? And it became numbers on a spreadsheet more than actual payments. And it was really because I didn't think we had the expertise at the time to launch it. And I felt it was a negotiating tool for me. So that's kind of how we viewed payments. But to get back to kind of fully working with PE, Ryan, I'd love to hear like diligence. So you kind of pick a PE fund, you sign LOI. What does diligence look like? What do you have to look out for? And one thing I'd love for you to hit on, I know is a bit sensitive here, but every PE deal we did, the growth equity deal we did, and the PE deal we did, we got recut at the last minute.
No.
And what that meant for us was we were $1 million. I had told my whole team that we were raising a big round of money. I told my family, my wife thought we were getting some money. We were $1 million in legal fees. And what happens a week before close? Well, my investment committee found that the retention helped me help you. Okay, pick this new valuation. And the truth is, as a founder, you're stuck in a hard place. Everyone, you're in it. You gotta really believe to be able to turn around. But talk to me about diligence, and then how founders can at least avoid that recut stage that tends to happen a lot.
Oh man, there's so much good stuff there to unpack. Maybe just taking a step back before we even get to the diligence phase. If you are meeting the investor for the first time when they're asking for data, you've already done it wrong. Like, these people are partners to you for years at a time. You need to be able to trust them. You need to be able to have confidence that they are aligned with how you think about the strategic vision of the business. They also need to have a say in that too. Because that alignment, that partnership can really do wonders for a business, or it can be the biggest nightmare for your next 3 to 5 years in the business, because like it or not, that person's gonna have a say. And if you disagree constantly, it is gonna be a miserable, miserable ride. So even before you get to the diligence phase, I would just take the time to think about, all right, 3-year growth plan. What does that look like? What are my growth levers? What are my key milestones that are coming up? When does a fundraise make the most sense? And then from that, what is the type of investor and partner that can help me be successful to achieve that plan? That's number one. Number two, figure out who those partners are and start building the relationships with them early. My best investments, I knew the businesses for 2 years, 2.5 years before actually talking about data and looking at data. And I think that did wonders for the relationship and our ability to just move fast once we get capital into the business. Anyways, back to your question. So let's say you built the relationship, now it's time to actually work towards a deal, work towards a term sheet. Yeah, I mean, there are a few things that you need to have, you need to be able to produce, and I'm really gonna frame this around kind of growth equity and private equity because the data requests are gonna be relatively consistent. So first of all, everybody wants to test for product market fit, right? There is no better way to do that than to just give them your customer level subscription revenue or just revenue generally on a customer basis. Let them cut retention, let them run cohort analyses on top of it, let them assess for themselves based on their own investment committee frameworks the degree of product market fit in the business, all right? So having clean data, having ideally somebody in the business who can help you package that data up is great to do, but that's job number one. Job number two, have an understanding of the forecast in the business, at least for the next 12 months, because any investor, when they give you a valuation, they are pricing in, right, the future performance of the business. And you need to have a forecast that's believable, that's achievable. These deals usually run 1 or 2 months, right? So you want to be able to perform consistently against that forecast and hopefully beat it in order to really support a premium valuation. And then like strategy, narrative. Spend time thinking about what is it that we're going to go do together and what is it that you're investing behind. So you brought up a great point. Is it a payments product? Is it M&A? Is it just, we need to own more of this market, and here's the reasons to believe that we are the best product in market, and I need to go hire a sales team quickly? Help me go do that. But put together a forecast that shows the required investment behind it and help make the narrative come alive through a set of materials that form a basis for you to build a narrative around. And honestly, that's kind of it. Like, if the investor's worth their salt, they'll be able to riff with you and dialogue with you and engage with you and whoever you have running finance to tease out the right things depending on your business model. Those are probably the most important things.
I think you said a good thing there. Whoever you have running finance. I think one thing that we learned during the process was we tried to raise some growth equity and it didn't go super well the first time. We didn't have a CFO. And what I realized during the diligence process was having a CFO that could run the process and gut check the investors' numbers, how they looked at it, gut check at how we looked at it, because you're data dumping a lot of information and you're analyzing a lot of information and you can look at it a lot of different ways. So what I found was that when we had the CFO, not only did I think we got a premium valuation during the process because we could defend how we looked at things and we could show our work versus saying, hey, here, go do the work. But then after we started working with private equity, man, having a CFO that they could communicate with directly made my life so much easier. Yeah. And it was a complete game changer in that perspective. Andrew, I'm curious on your side, you from the operator standpoint, and now you're kind of sitting on the boards of some of these companies, like what do those teams have to look like in your mind that are successful working with private equity or companies like you guys? I think
one of the greatest values is actually that network. You talked about, I'm actually interested to ask you a question about, not doing payments because you actually wanted to sell futures essentially. And I wonder sometimes if you can actually underbake the outcome there. You actually sort of come in and they look at it and say, actually, subjectively, here's a bad example. We just use this as this. When actually, potentially, you could actually, there's a lot more headroom of opportunity. So for me, I like in the diligence process, in the discussions, I actually just love to hear how people are thinking about it, because a lot of times people will say, we're in payments, we're doing payments. I actually want to see, we call it the natural owner of the transaction. Are you the natural owner of the transaction? Another way to say it is, have you earned the right to win in payments? And so I like to assess that and say, right, well, because payments is not a zero-sum game. I can look at it, I can look at a business and go, yeah, there's no way that they should have a payments business. And then I can have a chat with the founder, and I can really understand where they work from. I go, whoa, that's an incredible opportunity. And it's a good opportunity for issuing, and it's a good opportunity for capital, and it's a good opportunity for those things. So it's about understanding and creating a conversation with the stakeholders of the business so you can really understand where that opportunity is. Because, a lot of people will say you start with payments, but there are a lot of businesses out there where payments, they're not in the flow. Whereas maybe there's embedded insurance, maybe there's embedded, all of these financial solutions that you can have now, embedded banking as a service, all of those things. So you need to really understand the business, and you need to have this conversation with them and peers, because that's one of the greatest benefits. Is the thing I love most about this is that I've been doing this for a long time, and I still don't have all of the answers, but the group that we have together that we built, there's like 15, 20, 25 of us. We get on a call regularly, and we have conversations, and we all learn from each other. That, to me, is probably more valuable than any other sort of component of diligence or research template or anything like that, or VCP. I think that value there comes from it. It only comes in an authentic, exactly what Ryan was saying, is getting to know your investors and getting to know them to a point where they are part of your business. They're not just an investor in your business.
Yeah. I talked to someone yesterday who said, we want to raise growth equity, but it's only minority. And I had that same mindset, and I kind of laughed because, still having a giant minority investor that owns a large preferred shares, you're still, whether you want to call it minority or majority, you have a giant, essentially, co-founder at the business. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter if it's majority or minority or whatever, the business probably won't succeed. So now we're working with the private equity fund or the growth equity fund. I want to talk about how to work with them and how the business changes. Something that really opened my eyes was when we raised from venture, it was you could invest a lot of money in revenue that'll impact you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the road. However, when you're with growth equity and private equity, their timeline is 4 years. And the example I gave was we bought 7 companies when growth equity invested in us, and we had a COBOL ERP, right? We couldn't find any, it's just a 30-year-old ERP system. And the venture side in me was we're going to build this brand new ERP system. We're going to invest all this money. It's going to be great. We're going to migrate people. And the truth is, the growth equity guys, they were a little bit more private equity guys, did not want to hear that I was going to spend $10 million in R&D, hope to move people. And by the way, that's going to take me 2 or 3 years. And by the end of your 4-year investment, we're going to have a great product. But that doesn't mean the enterprise value has changed. So the window of how I needed to operate the business changed a bit. So talk to me about just working with, that's the big difference for me, was working with private equity and growth equity versus venture, was the time horizon was different. But what else is different when you're actually partnered with them and in the business that you need to kind of look out for?
Yeah, do you want me to start with that one?
Go ahead.
Also, I didn't hit on your retrade question. Do you want me to answer
Yeah, let's go
that
back
first?
to the retrade question.
That's a spicy.
We can't leave you off the hook there.
Yeah. Is everybody familiar with this concept of retrade, by the way? Show of hands, who knows? Okay, so more than half don't know. So retrade, all he's talking about is you have valuation that you agree on when you're working towards an investment. That valuation shows up in a term sheet. Term sheet dictates not just valuation, but all the rights and preferences and everything. You agree on that up front. Then you do due diligence. And at the end of due diligence and at the end of drafting up legal documents that basically dictate how you're going to relate to each other all the way through an eventual exit, right beforehand, said investor comes back and says, I know I priced your deal at $100 million of enterprise value. It's now 80, and here's why.
It's not right beforehand. It's when you're $1 million in legal fees, you're mentally exhausted. Let's just be clear on what it is. I think some people use it as a vehicle. I think most people don't use it as
well, and that's the primary distinction, and I think it just brings up a broader topic. I mean, there are a lot of investors out there. I mean, the amount of dry powder that's accumulated on the sidelines is astronomical. The amount of new funds that have been minted over the past decade are astronomical. You want to partner with an investor that thinks of this as a long-term business, right? There are some out there who will look at kind of having you over a barrel at the last minute, already spent legal fees, as this is the premium time to negotiate down on value, which ultimately helps their returns at your expense. later on when you exit. Now, I will say this, everybody wants a fair deal, right? Sometimes things do happen. Sometimes you lose your largest customer in the middle of diligence and like instead of killing the deal outright, we're gonna price that in. And sometimes you have a conversation around that. But it should be a conversation and it should relate back to the underlying fundamentals of the business that have been discovered in due diligence, not because it is some way to penny pinch and scrape value from you. So when that does happen, like I would press pause and I would really evaluate which of the side on the fence do you think this is coming from. If you think it's a legitimate thing, close over it, just do it. Everybody wants a fair deal. Everybody will feel better closing at the right price. More times than not though, you want to invest with an investor who's done the work beforehand, who has done the diligence before they presented you valuation and will stand behind that when they close. So. And a lot of times, this is the last thing I'll say about it, back in 2021, everybody was bragging about 6 days to a term sheet, 5 days to a term sheet, and getting these astronomical valuations. You know the person who is negatively impacted behind that? It's all of you. Because if an investor doesn't do the homework and doesn't price the deal right, they're either going to retrade on you at the last minute when you've spent $1 million in legal fees, or it's going to set up an unachievable valuation to achieve at exit where you're never going to agree on the operating plan going forward, and it's going to be a painful experience. So let them do the homework, let them do their diligence, let them present you a fair valuation, and then let them stand behind that at the end of the day. Anyways. What was your question again?
So you're working with the private equity or growth equity fund, and now you're in a 4-year window.
Yeah,
so now what?
Okay, cool. So a little bit of a difference between the two operate. First of all, venture capital wants to add enormous operational value to you, just like private equity does. However, the way portfolios are constructed and the way a venture capitalist divides their time across a number of companies is very different from a private equity fund. Venture capital fund, you have to diversify the way the risk in the portfolio. So a venture capital investor is going to invest in 20 companies, 25 companies. And because of that, their time is going to be limited per investment. Also, if you start going off the rails, like, sorry, they're probably going to spend a lot of the time with their winners because they have to. They have to produce a great return on a portfolio level and really nurture their winners in the portfolio. Private equity side, it's complete opposite. Like they're assembling a portfolio of 10 companies. And each investor within the portfolio is probably going to cover 2 or 3 in a vintage. And so you are going to get their undivided time and energy and effort because the way their portfolio is constructed, every single one needs to be a winner. So that's the biggest difference between the two. The second difference is from that stems how much time, energy, and resources a fund can provide you. So if you're partnering with a big private equity fund that has a large asset base, that asset base pays for resources, things like a consulting group, things like amazing operating partners like Andrew, things like great events to bring your executive team together to immerse them in how to build a great business, right? Truly value-added things. On the private equity side, you get a lot more of that because the funds tend to be a little bit bigger and they can pay for more resources to provide your business. On the venture capital side, still doing that, but it's probably more a little bit informal and it's based on networks, it's based on introducing you to great repeat executives, people they know in their network, always being a shoulder to cry on. Private equity does that too, but a lot of it tends to be that.
And then, Andrew, just to round us out before we get to questions here. So now you're working with private equity, and they're like, okay, cool, we want to launch payments. One trap we ran into was one of the private equity fund that invested in us owned a payment company. Yeah. So we were like blindly, we're going with that one. And we didn't know anything about payments, so we talked to a bunch of people. It made the most sense to do the one they owned. How do you talk to founders about like doing the diligence of the payment companies? And do you find that a lot of the private equity funds try to get you to use the one they're invested in? Or how should founders approach that now that they're, cool, we partner with this private equity fund, we now need to pick a payment company? How should they approach that?
So again, I can't speak, I'm an operator, I don't come from the investment side of things, but I'll tell you in growth equity, which is where I live, it's very much it's a pull, not a push. So there's no playbook. And I think, Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but certainly in the more true private equity, there's playbooks. There's like, they make the investment and this is the accounting software they use, this is the payment provider you use, this is this is what you do. And it's like, that's not right or wrong. It's just that's how designed to create value in the time frame with which they want to make change, turn around, exit. That's it. Growth equity is a little different. So there's no sort of enforced kind of, this is who you use, this is the payment provider. We're very agnostic. And I think that was one of the things when I started. It was very clear to me. It's like we look at all of the different providers and we will help companies, our portfolio companies, navigate all of not only the payment companies, all the financial service providers, the banking as a service providers, and actually get the best one for them that works for their business. And so it's a much more sort of a collaborative process. We are just a partner in the business and finding the right solution from them rather than coming in with a preconceived notion as what they should do. And that is an approach that it certainly resonates with me as a recovering CEO. I don't want anyone to come into my business and tell me how to run it. So it works for me, and I think it works well because this sector is integrated payments and financial services is dizzying to me. Just the pace of change. And so to say that we have one solution, it's the one solution that's going to fit every single portfolio company to me it feels strange and off. But that's the approach that we take, and most growth equity firms take.
Got it. Okay. Well, I know we have a few minutes left. I want to open it up for some questions. See if we have any questions for the panelists up here. Yeah.
I've had friends who sold to private equity and he thought that he would learn a ton from their operating partners. He said he was kind of disenchanted after a couple of years. And I've also had growth equity investors I've talked to that have said, hey, the playbooks, from the big firms sound really great, but they apply to maybe 20% of your problems. And where all the value is like getting into the trenches and solving together that other 80%.
Yeah.
Do you measure the hit rate of your playbooks? Do you
Yeah.
have like a point of view on how applicable they are across different
Yeah.
business or different verticals?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And then just to add to that, do companies pay for all these services?
Yeah, that's a great question. On the playbooks, I think I hate that term, by the way. I think it is terrible. It implies that study up and here's all the answers to the test. And we all know, business is not like that. I think the value in our best practices, at least for Vista, is to just give a framework for how to think about solving a business problem. Half the time you're met with a big meaty problem or huge opportunity and you don't even know where to start. And the value in a best practice is that it's time tested, it's battle tested, it's the result of multiple companies utilizing it, refining it. Our best practices are actually authored by our companies. There's no scientist in the bomb lab who's coming up with this and saying, here you go. It's time tested, it's revised repeatedly over and over again, but ultimately it has to be adapted for each individual company because businesses are way more complex than that. So I think it's a good starting point. I would actually totally agree with that person who told you that. It gets you 20%, 30%, 40% of the way there. And then it's up to the operating partner, the investor, the CEO, the management team to sit down and say, okay, what applies to this business? What needs to change? What's unique about our market? How does this actually go into the annual operating plan so that we can build off of it from there? And we do test it. We do test it routinely. And we throw out the ones that don't work, or we revise the ones that don't work. We're building new ones right now around Gen AI, how to use Gen AI internally for different functional areas of the business, how to build agentic products. We're going to refine that over and over and over rapidly over the next 6-12 months to make sure that it works and has really high efficacy. So
yeah, I don't think that I think playbook it's a very loaded term.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't think you can build a playbook for embedded payments. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies, and you could probably see similarities in a handful of them in how it works. So I think that there are things that I've personally created, like it's a framework of how you think about pricing. If you've never priced payments, which is fundamentally different than software, it's like, okay, here it is. Here's a document that actually helps you think about it. Not so you can just get off and do it. It's like, it'll frame the next conversation so the next 45 minutes or an hour, whatever it is that we have, is valuable because it actually brings us to a same point where we're actually speaking the same language. So I feel and by the way, that's okay in growth equity. For me, it's because I'm not working with like hundreds and hundreds of companies. There's like, I've got a handful of businesses that I'm helping in different things. Maybe one is wants some help hiring a head of payments. Maybe the other one is doing a migration, and the other one is implementing, for the first time. So all of these things are fundamentally different, and so each approach is going to be different. So I'm creating these tools just to help me, so I don't have to repeat myself over the course of time. But it's not a playbook per se. So that doesn't answer your question.
Let me take the jaded founder side of that really quick. The jaded founder side of that is like, you're the CEO. Like, listen, you're surrounded by smart people all the time. You have to take some advice, throw some out, use some. I kind of underwrite the whole thing as like, who do I trust? Who do I like working with? And any help that any of these operating partners or investors are going to help me with is gravy on top. But that's almost secondary to this entire thing. Because the truth is, you're still the CEO, you know the business better than anyone, and you still have to execute on it. So like, I think all of the funds have really smart people surrounding them, but it's still up to you to execute. I think the bigger thing to look for is like, can I go into marriage with these people for 4 years, and when shit hits the fan in 4 years, and I want to sell, but it's not a 3x multiple, or I want to raise money, like, can I have a real conversation? That, to me, is more important. And then the question of, do you pay for it? You pay for it in valuation, in my opinion. Like, the funds that I think have more to offer can squeeze you a little bit more in valuation because they can help you more likely 3x or 4x or 5x. But in my experience, you're not like paying for the operating partner's time or something.
I'm just gonna, so first of all, if I hadn't sort of given off that vibe, I'm also an exhausted founder, ex-founder, an exasperated founder.
Jaded.
Jaded, thank you. All of the above for me. But I would say that one of the real values, again, talking about payments financial services, is that I don't necessarily agree that the CEO does know it. In my business, it was a big business. I can't profess to being an absolute micro specialist about every single function in their business. And so it's especially true in payments, because payments is different than software. And so you have a business that has organically gone from, it is a rule of 40, 50, 60 business. And then all of a sudden they wake up one day and embedded payments is like 30, 40% of their revenue. That doesn't necessarily mean they're specialists. So having resources that actually understand what the value is and what it could be and what it should be, and playing that back, I honestly think that's an incredibly important value, because I actually don't believe that some of the leadership and some of the founders and some of these businesses, I actually don't believe that they're completely sold on whether or not that is an area to invest in when there's so many other opportunities to invest across other parts of their business.
That's fair. I think we had one more question. Do you want to take one more?
Okay. One more question, then there is networking if you want to continue to ask questions right after this.
Cool. Thank Todd for this. 2 quick questions. You talked about the payment starting to create a lot of value. Is there a benchmark at, let's say, like a $100 million transaction over the whole year is where you start really looking at payments being a significant source of revenue? That's the one. If you guys have seen any benchmark at some of the vertical SaaS company doing it. The second, when you are $1 million in revenue and you have a certain amount of traction, there are 2 opportunities. One is definitely the payments, what we are talking about. And then there's, I was talking to Todd about it, there's a bunch of AI opportunities that are just popping up. And that's just giving you rocket ship velocity. And if you guys had thought about any framework to make a choice between both of these opportunities.
So thank you for that. I'm going to take the second question first if I can. I was sitting at a meeting with a company, one of the companies I'm on the board of, and we were talking about all of these opportunities that we've got going on. And there's all of these embedded opportunities, there's AI things, there's all of these things. And one of the comments was, and it didn't come from me, which is extraordinary because it was about payments, if you're a hammer, everything's a nail. But what was fascinating was, the comment was, guys, just to be clear, all of these are fantastic, they're incredibly important for our customers, but none of them are going to be payments from a revenue standpoint. Because the thing about payments is that it happens very slowly and then quickly all at once. All of a sudden, I think it was AJ saying, all of a sudden it's like, the volume of money that you are making, because it not only is it increases and is accretive, but it's a value driver for everyone. Everyone gets a benefit out of it if it's done correctly. And so, yes, absolutely, there are probably 3, 4, 5 things that you as a founder can invest in. Is payments the right one? I don't know. Could there be other ones? Yeah, maybe. But if it's, depending on what business you're in, then it is a significant driver, and also, it is also foundational. Let's be clear. Embedded payments is like the first thing. Once you've earned the right there, then you think about, right, well, let's talk about lending, let's talk about issuing, let's talk about insurance, let's talk about payroll, let's talk about, and you've earned the right there, and you're just layering on it. So it's a foundational thing as well. So yeah, I'm not saying.
Do you think at $1 million of revenue, you're still earning the right to, with your core customers, that launching payments might be a distraction because 100%. You don't have enough traction in your.
100%, absolutely correct. Yeah, that's right. So you don't know, but. I think a lot of people look at it and think, what do you mean I'm only going to be making 80 basis points on $1? I mean, who cares about that? I'm not going to bother. Well, that 80 basis points, that 60, 80 basis points, 80, 90, whatever it is, that can become a 30, 40, 50, 70, 80, $100 million business in and of its own right, relatively quickly. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on what I was going to say was, I think it does take, for payments to really work, you've got to be able to iterate. You've got to be able to test on a bunch of customers. If you haven't grown to like sufficient scale in terms of number of customers, I think it's going to be really hard to do that.
Any particular scale that you have seen, not in your case, or?
Well, you can do the math. At 80 basis points, you could figure out how much revenue flows through the system, and is your TAM even there with your customer base, right?
And I'm the first to say, if you don't do it properly and if you don't invest in it, there's absolutely no point in doing it. Because a lot of people will say, hey, look, I plugged in my payment processor and we offered it out there. No one's doing it. It's such a we didn't work. It's not a feature. It's not a product. It needs to be built into the value proposition. It needs to be built into the customer journey. It needs to create value and all of those things. So you're right. If you don't have scale, then it could be an absolute distraction. Maybe you're better off investing somewhere else, getting to 10 million, getting to 20 million, and then attaching it. Only you would know that.
Yeah. And then, your other question was around agentic products or Gen AI products. I think it all depends on your end market and the speed of adoption of those products. What are the jobs to be done? There are some markets out there where it's blue collar labor and they're, probably the speed of adoption is going to be slower. And there's going to be some skepticism and lack of trust around this product. So you could build until you're blue in the face, but our customers going to adopt it? So I think it all just depends on the context of the business at the time. But does that help? It's kind of a little bit of a framework. Yeah.
I think we've taken them overboard here.
All right, that was really awesome. Any other questions? We do have some time to just mingle and hang out, meet more people. So thank you to the panelists. This was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.